And that's the farthest a UAPDA Act has ever been. So right there, it's a victory.
Why wasn't Harry Reid's effort fruitful?
It's a good question what Harry Reid's motives were.
Yeah, Trump looks great. You're right. He's almost wants to be this neutral referee. Like, what do I care? Disclose everything.
I think Congress wants that in there because they're basically pissed because it's been kept from Congress, which is against the law.
I can't say obviously, people. I can't say that word.
Obfuscation.
Good word. You kids at home, it's a good word.
Well, yeah, there's a whole story about that. In fact, that just came out 2 weeks ago.
Ontological shock coming your way. Free energy. No more utility bills. That's all I got. Sorry. Sorry, I'm high.
Who brought the marshmallows?
Hey everybody, welcome in. Gerard DeVries, Honest John, Cosmic Soul Boogie Show, where we talk about everything UAP. Today's discussion, what we call the maze of disclosure. You know, I'm a recent traveler on the UAP journey, and for me in the past, disclosure was, you know, another mass sighting or someone important saying important things. But what I'm realizing is any pieces or breadcrumbs of disclosure have to flow through many different government avenues and agencies, some secretive, some not so secretive. So today we want to discuss where disclosure is in terms of moving through the government. And I have the perfect person to talk about it, my colleague Gerard DeVries. And I thought, Gerard, we might just start with the recent goings-on with the UAP disclosure amendment. There was an attempt in 2023, a recent attempt now, and I think if you pick it up from there and show me the important people and processes that this disclosure must get through to become even a larger, realistic disclosure. So please help me out with that a bit.
Yeah, the UAPDA Act. Let's back up a little bit because, again, this show is really for those people just starting to go down the rabbit hole, right?
Like myself, in a way.
Right. That's why we're kind of doing just short shows, you know, not too deep dives, because there are plenty of great podcasts for that. But let's back up a little bit. The UAPDA Act was first introduced by Senator Rounds and Schumer and mentioned non-human intelligence over 20 times. They mentioned things like eminent domain. In other words, if these aerospace companies have this reversed alien technology, that it really belongs to the government, et cetera, et cetera. It got killed, as we spoke about before, and it was tried again a year later in 2024, I believe. And here we are again in 2026, and they're trying to get it through again. Again, Schumer and Rounds are pushing their own version or writing their own version. Burleson just put a version in Congress that actually got voted on by the House and Rules Committee.
Correct.
And that's the farthest a UAPDA Act has ever been. So right there, it's a victory for all of us who have been advocating for disclosure all this time.
Let's talk about what's in this most recent attempt.
Well, we've spoken about hoping that there would be amnesty in there, you know, or waiving the NDAs, their non-disclosure agreements. As far as I know, that was not in there, but they are talking about trying to have in the Senate some type of committee that would have subpoena power, which is really important because that was one of the problems, let's say, with the UAP task force. They didn't have subpoena power.
To subpoena the private companies.
To subpoena witnesses in private companies or
divulge.
whistleblowers
Okay,
or
got
whoever to testify either in public or behind closed doors or whatever. So that subpoena power is really important. And to have the power to declassify and basically disclose to the public what they find. You know, so that's, from what I understand, the basic premise of what is in this version of the UAPDA Act that Burleson has put forward. Now, of course, it still has to be negotiated upon with the Senate. You know, it might get better, it might get worse. We just don't know yet. You know, maybe the Senate will say, no, we want eminent domain in there. We want, you know, amnesty, for instance. You know, so we're not sure what's going to happen.
But it's interesting that you're already aware of things that won't be in there that you hope are in there.
Yeah, I'm hoping, for instance, eminent domain would be in there. You know, I think Congress wants that in there because they're basically pissed because it's been kept from Congress, which is against the law.
It's against the people.
Right. You're not allowed to keep secret access programs away from Congress, especially the Gang of Eight, which Schumer and Rounds are part of, by the way. They're hoping to put it in the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, at the end of the year, which happens every year.
So it's interesting then the NDAA, which is a rather large bill that gets proposed annually, our UAP disclosure amendment is part and parcel of that.
Yes, hopefully.
Okay. If that gets passed with all the bells and whistles we hope for, immunity, whistleblower protection, I know that's very much related to perhaps our President Trump trying to take away the NDAs, trying to provide more freedom for people to talk. So take me from there, that if Trump then disposes of NDAs, great for revelation, correct? Take me, if that happens, where we see the UAP disclosure amendment flowing in this maze, because it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have light at the end of the tunnel. Help me there.
A lot of people are very happy about the fact that Trump instructed the Department of War and the intelligence community to waive NDAs when it comes to UAPs and UFOs. But in my opinion, it's not as fantastic as people think.
And that's curious.
And that's because they will waive the NDAs and all that if they speak to either Arrow or Pursue.
Tell me about those two organizations.
So Arrow, nobody trusts. Nobody trusts Arrow. Arrow was formed by Congress a few years ago to get to the so-called bottom of the UAP phenomenon. And they appointed somebody named Kirkpatrick as director. And that did not work out too well because nobody trusted Kirkpatrick from the very beginning.
He was related to CIA, right? So
well, yeah, there's a whole story about that. In fact, that just came out 2 weeks ago. That was never known. That was never disclosed until 2 weeks ago with Eric Davis. Yeah, he's a suspicious character. Now, he was only director for about a year and a half. And even after he was director, he was still writing op-eds against UAPs. When he was director, he testified before Congress with Senator Gillibrand, basically saying there's nothing to this. And the whole question was always, you're the guy who's supposed to be investigating all this. We just had Grush in a hearing saying that he sent 40 witnesses to the Inspector General. Don't tell me there's nothing to look at.
It's like the fox in charge of the hen house.
Yeah, it was really suspicious, right? So Harry Reid got money for a black operation, which was basically to study UFOs back in the day when he was Senate Majority
Like $22 million.
$22 million. He wanted to have Lockheed Martin give some of their alien tech, basically, to a company called Bigelow Aerospace. And that had the kibosh put on it by the CIA. So come to find out, not only was it the CIA who put the kibosh on that deal, it was a guy named Glenn Gaffney. Now, you might remember Glenn Gaffney's name from the UFO hearings that had George Knapp.
Right.
Because at one point they were asked, who's the gatekeeper or who are the gatekeepers? And nobody said anything. And finally, George Knapp spoke up and said, well, you could start with Glenn Gaffney.
Are any of you willing to name specific gatekeepers within the root cell of the UAP SAP Federation?
I have a name for you.
Go ahead.
Glenn Gaffney, CIA.
Glenn Gaffney, CIA.
So Gaffney is the head of science and technology in the CIA. He's the one who killed the deal between Lockheed and Bigelow. And last week, Eric Davis went on a podcast and not only revealed that Kirkpatrick, again, the first director of this UFO program run by the Pentagon, was CIA, but that his mentor was none other than Glenn Gaffney.
People might know by now, I don't know if they do, but Gaffney was actually Kirkpatrick's mentor.
What?
Kirkpatrick did work at the CIA. Yes, Kirkpatrick was his boss and mentor at one time during his career.
That explains everything. Holy shit.
Couple highlights of who Eric Davis is: PhD in astrophysics, supported NASA Air Force Research Laboratory and Office of the Secretary of Defense projects in space, nuclear propulsion,
Chief
and power
Science
systems, and senior research physicist, technical support for DoD Task Force, Edwards Air Force Base, Advanced Space Propulsion and Power Concepts, World Vehicle Technologies, Department of Defense, and it just goes on and on and on. So that's who Eric Davis is.
So we could see, again, even these two gentlemen, on the face of it, kind of being touted as pushers of disclosure, want to get to the bottom of the UAP phenomenon, but they're really in the maze. They're blocking.
It's total bullshit.
They're right.
Yeah, it's still obfuscation. It's
right. I can't say obviously, people. I can't say that word.
Obfuscation.
Good word. You kids at home, it's a good word.
It was total bullshit. Putting the fox in charge of the hen house, right? Same old story. So they put Kirkpatrick in there, who's CIA, who's so-called the one who's supposed to be, investigating all these occurrences and phenomena and interviewing witnesses, and the whole time he's working for the other side.
It's funny though, because the more you and I talk, we get into this same cycle, don't we? Do you remember? It seems to me we were talking about the UAP Disclosure Amendment. Great if it gets passed with all the bells and whistles. Trump's adding some fuel to it, saying we're going to get rid of non-disclosure acts. It really seems like we have momentum. And then, much like going back to Project Blue Book, that was supposed to be disclosure-oriented, but turned out to be more of a gatekeeper.
I know very well that it was not a scientific project. Also, I also know that they never would notify the media when an interesting case came up. They did everything they could to keep it down. So they definitely withheld information. In Blue Book, for instance, we would get reports from military pilots, and that was particularly embarrassing to the Air Force because after they had trained those men, and they could say that a civilian pilot might have been untrustworthy, but they could hardly say that of their own military pilots, and we got case after case after case from military pilots which never hit the press.
It is interesting, whether you like President Trump or not. I guess 10 years ago I wouldn't have bet that he would at least be on the side or open to getting rid of NDAs and to, for all intents and purposes, seemingly pursuing disclosure.
Is he doing it because he wants disclosure? Is he doing it because of his ego? He wants to be remembered for all time, being the president that came out with disclosure?
Yeah.
Or is it because politically, when the UFO topic used to be kryptonite for politicians, it's not kryptonite anymore. Now it's almost a plus point. And the public is behind it. The website where they were putting all these government drops, I think it's almost 2 billion hits by now. We're going to be talking about a certain celebrity who just flipped, and Google went up 400% for UAP searches and for UFO searches just by him saying it. So I think politically, could it be that it's a good thing to talk about? Because he's not, right? Trump isn't really giving us anything. Yes, it sounds great that he's going to have these NDAs waived, but he damn well knows nobody's going to go to Arrow and nobody's going to go to this Pursue thing, which we really haven't talked about. But Pursue isn't even a program or an entity or anything.
It's like an effort.
It's an effort. And who is it an effort by? It's by ODNI, the Office of Director of National Intelligence, Department of War, Department of Energy, long connected with crash retrieval programs, and the CIA. So if you're a whistleblower, are you going to go to one of those programs and possibly go to jail if you say the wrong thing? I mean, are you going to trust those, Arrow or Pursue? So is it really an effort, is what I'm saying? Is it really an effort for disclosure, or is it just because it's politically good for him right now?
Yeah, Trump looks great. You're right. He almost wants to be this neutral referee. Like, what do I care? Disclose everything. Hey, Cosmic Soul Boogie Show, one of the few UFO shows where we talk deep, but we make it fun and it's short and brief. If you like what you see, please like it, please subscribe, enjoy yourself. We're all going to learn something.
Did you see that article in Time magazine?
I did. So I got to think, for you, who've studied this longer than I, all of a sudden, Man, this UAP disclosure is starting to feel like mainstream culture, huh? Or I know that's not true, but it feels that way.
Yeah, I have to keep telling myself not to get too excited.
Right.
You know, again, yeah, we've been waiting a long time for this, and it is amazing how much mainstream attention this subject has gotten over the last, especially the last like 3-4 years. It just blows me away. And to see something in Time magazine is something I never would have guessed, 10, 20 years ago.
Well, it's reminiscent of the big 2017 New York Times article. The Times carries that same cloud, if not more. And when, what was her name? Her last name was Keene. Mm-hmm. When that article came out and really began what I want to call the modern disclosure movement.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And yet it's interesting, though, even that article that we can all go back and retrieve, that's kind of now like old news. Like it's not shaking anybody up. But now we have the time. And we're hoping for, a few more people get on it,
Yeah, before 2017, the way I think about it was I had my tinfoil hat on.
You did.
And after the article in 2017, I was slowly allowed to start taking it off.
I remember coming over tonight. I thought it was Halloween every Friday. I came to see you because...
Yeah, I was talking a lot about UFOs.
But that's so interesting because, as we've been doing this show, we've been just kind of, really trying to tout... new advancements in disclosure. And we were talking just a bit earlier about certain celebrities that kind of advanced this cause. And I think you were interested in recently Dr. Phil, who isn't really a newcomer, but what are your thoughts on Dr. Phil becoming a player in this disclosure process?
Yeah, we got another flipper, I like to call him.
Flipper.
Yeah, Dr. Phil came out. He apparently was shown some files, before there was by the way, there was another drop of files today. Again, nothing spectacular. Same old type of FLIR type imagery.
Breadcrumbs.
And kind of. But he came out a couple weeks ago and said that he had been invited to the White House to check out these files before they were released for that batch. And then came out on his show and everything completely 100% behind UAPs. And, you have to be a little suspicious. Why was he called to the White House? Why is he suddenly going on TV and talking about disclosure? Was he told to start talking about disclosure and how psychologically it could affect everybody and maybe to help out with that? You can't help but go there.
You can't. And I did have a chance to listen to Phil a little bit on YouTube. And it's interesting. Whenever we talk of disclosure, anything ufology, right? We're very accustomed to. We know we're going to hear from top generals and admirals and Navy pilots and people with all kinds of security clearance. But I think what Dr. Phil is essentially saying, hey, please set a plate for psychology. Excuse me, at this disclosure table. In other words, Dr. Phil, that a big drop will happen soon. And he's really saying, Gerard, that they're going to drop it and there won't be any context or like instructions to go with it. He's quite concerned that those amongst us that are, not as mentally sound as others, he's kind of concerned that fraudsters and other charlatans will exploit this and convince people you got to buy a school bus and we're going to bury it in Nevada and that's where we're going to live. He's kind of concerned that the government will disclose something big, and yet without context and disclosure, he thinks the government's throwing the populace to the wolves with no way to interpret it. So in that sense, maybe he's going to be helpful.
Oh, I think he will. I mean, I'm not a huge Dr. Phil fan,
I could tell.
as you know. But anything helps. Anybody who comes out who's a celebrity or has some kind of connection with the White House or anything like that comes out in support of disclosure has 100% of my support.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Phil has been on TV for 25 years being America's psychologist, so for good or bad. But I don't see his participation in disclosure as a bad thing.
No, the only negative thing is, again, just like Neil deGrasse Tyson, it's like they have to make an excuse why they weren't jumping on this bandwagon a long time ago. And again, Neil deGrasse Tyson, whatever it was a couple months ago when he flipped. And he said, yeah, it's not a bunch of drunken revelers anymore. Well, that's not true. We've had a lot of very credible people.
Regardless of their drinking habits.
Yeah, for decades now. Yeah. And it was kind of the same thing with Dr. Phil, except he said, it's not a bunch of people talking about getting abducted with anal probes.
Anal probe, right.
And, I was kind of like, are you doing that on purpose? Because, if you're accepting that there are, ETs or NHI around, how can you not have taken the next leap forward and said, well, maybe all these people, tens of thousands who have said they've been abducted, might have been abducted? Or are you not saying that because you are taking the psychological perspective and trying to break people in and say, listen, don't worry about that right now. It's just about craft and there's something here. We'll talk to you about the abductions next year kind of thing to break people in.
I think you're right. I think Dr. Phil is trying to almost bifurcate these two, what I'm calling a new age of disclosure. Say it's 2017 with the New York Times. But I think Dr. Phil, as a psychologist, has figured he'll garner more support and get more people to jump on board if he keeps it in this new scientific age of disclosure. So he'd like to put tinfoil hat, anal probe, hey, I'm lost in the desert, and shook hands with an alien. Yes. He'd like that not to be the beginning of the discussion. He would like, I think, at least from 2017 on, the videos we have of the 5 observables, which, got me on board. I think Dr. Phil wants to operate from that as the foundation and move forward. And let's put all those old Westerns behind us.
Yeah, well, that's the same old story kind of thing. And we still talk about Elizondo and people like Christopher Mellon, who at first, after 2017, went from craft to NHI, not Chinese or Russian. And about, a couple of years later, they started talking about crash retrievals. It always seems like the same plan to slowly get people used to what's going on. And Dr. Phil being connected with the White House, kind of doing the same thing. Again, you got to think that's all part of this master plan to slowly get people used to the idea that we are not alone.
Hey, speaking of Lou Elizondo.
Oh, God.
Now, listen, I think we finally stumbled on something that all our viewers will appreciate, and that is gossip. You brought up the idea that you hesitate to talk a little bit more about this because it feels like we're gossiping, but the big hero of our disclosure movement, a guy with incredible military background, all kinds of clearances, but currently, again, real quick, Elizondo is kind of being criticized for...
Yeah, I hesitate because I live on UFO Twitter, on ex-UAP, and there is so much trolling going on, and the UFO community is not one that I'm proud of. They go after each other all the time. They're trying to do everything they can to get clicks and clickbaits, and one of the things they do is they insult each other often, and so I hate even going anywhere near it. That's one of the reasons I wanted to do this show, was so that anybody new to the subject wouldn't have to go through everything that I do, swim through that swamp every day just to get a few tidbits of real factual information. Right. So that's why I hate talking about this whole thing with Elizondo, but it started with Ross Coulthart.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, he started with Ross Coulthart when he said, basically, Lou knew more than he was talking about, that he might have been part of something, and was kind of calling him out.
And I've spoken to people in the legacy program who knew Lou. Lou, I know a lot of people, and they know you, and I know you can't speak about the role that you've held within the legacy program.
And then we had Daniel Sheehan, who used to be, or still is his lawyer.
His lawyer, yeah.
He used to be. And again, people who don't know who Daniel Sheehan is involved with the Pentagon Papers, Watergate, Iran-Contra, And he said that he either, again, let it slip or did it on purpose, but said that Lou used to be head of security for a crash retrieval program, which, if you've been following this, would be really big news because he never mentioned anything about that. It was just, Lou went to ATIP, the UFO program, and, didn't like what was going on because nobody was taking this threat seriously, and ended up resigning and making this whole big splash in the New York Times. So after that, there's a guy named UAP Gerb, who is a well-known researcher, really in depth. If you ever want to learn your acronyms, watch UAP Gerb. I do suggest his podcast. From my experience with UAP Gerb, he's always given very good, well-researched information. But he went on the Ross Coulthart show, or on News Nation with Ross Coulthart, And he basically said the same thing, that, Lou Elizondo was basically in cahoots with Clapper, the DNI at the time, to have this soft disclosure come out and, regulate how it comes out and everything, and that he was part of the program.
Is someone trying to control the narrative?
Yes. You made a statement recently, as of recording this program, where you talked about allegations and rumors of a pretty high-profile person within the UAP topic being appointed at a very high level to kind of spearhead the disclosure initiative or be integral to it out of the White House or executive branch. I'm going to go ahead and take that leap, and I will be very plain here. That individual is Luis Elizondo.
To your point, though, the reason we should mention it is that, Lou Elizondo, from the moment he became half whistleblower, half academic who's going to talk really deeply about disclosure, he seemed to have been at the forefront of that, a trailblazer, if you will. And now just recently, we're kind of maybe understanding that even he is going to put the brakes on something, right? Is that where we are?
Yeah.
Essentially, that he's going to get a little...
Yeah, well, Lou denies it. It's a weird...
Of course he does.
It's a weird denial because
Right.
he says... In one breath, he says, I've signed NDAs, where he literally says, I've signed NDAs where I can specifically not speak about crash retrieval programs.
Right.
I have been told, I was warned very, very clearly, this I'll share with you. I was told several years ago that I could never talk about crash retrievals or material, ever. And I signed a paperwork for it, right? So that in itself should be evidence for you.
So again, why would you have to sign an NDA for something that doesn't exist? So if you're not allowed to talk about it, okay. But on the other hand, for instance, he was driving to Washington, D.C. and did a quick video when all this was kind of breaking about him. And he basically called out Ross Coulthart, UAP GERB, and News Nation, and said, if you have any questions, call me. You got my number. None of this is basically true. And I will even, on a later interview, he said, I will take a lie detector test. I don't give a damn. And by the way, that person, meaning I guess UAP GERB, can take one too as to where he got that sourced information from. And, whoever doesn't pass a lie detector test should leave UFO world forever kind of thing. So, Lou came out swinging.
But you can't blame him, right? Because, I don't know Lou, but having studied a little bit what he's gone through in terms of disclosure, he's got to be thinking, I've sacrificed a lot here. I have put my career and life on the line. I've been really upfront with people. And now I'm going to catch a little bit on the backside of I'm not being upfront. Now, is Lou going to be any part of what we might call this new effort by the government to report and investigate UAPs? I speak of this effort called Pursue. Does Lou going to have any connection to Pursue or the older organization called Arrow? Is he connected there? Help the viewers get that a bit.
Well, that's basically what started this whole thing, is that apparently the word was that Lou was being considered for a kind of like UAP czar, because there's a lot going on right now in Congress. They have this science advisory board now with Avi Loeb from Harvard Astronomy. They have the governance board, which is going to overlook the science board. They have Pursue that we were talking about in the beginning of the show. There's Arrow is still happening, where so-called you can go if you want to be a whistleblower. But that kind of started the whole thing, that Lou was being considered for this UAP czar type of job. And there were people apparently in the program who were talking to Ross Coulthart saying that would be a huge mistake because he was part of the freaking program to begin with. And again,
Fox in charge of the hen
house. So that's where we're at with the Lou Elizondo gossip.
And that's going to continue. And, just like I said, you can imagine Lou feeling a little bit stabbed in the back here, because I think he thinks he's done a lot.
And he has done a lot.
Yeah,
it'd be hard to argue that anybody's done more than Lou.
See, I'm not making this up, but I do see now the Dr. Phil making fun of the anal probers, 2017, man. I see there's modern disclosure, and there's the old spaghetti westerns. Are we still talking? And I like to make this analogy. You remember Clint Eastwood got his fame from the old spaghetti westerns, but I say that because Roswell, Nevada, New Mexico deserts. What did Lonnie see, the sheriff, right? Was it Texas? And he shook hands or saw aliens. Other people saw them in overalls. But that does seem to be like something we'd rather forget. And let's move on to evasive video.
Either that.
I'm joking, but you feel what I'm saying.
I feel, although it might just be, I think it's just, there's a lot of ontological levels of ontological shock.
Coming.
That's coming, that people have to get used to. And the first thing they got to get used to is, there are things flying around. And then after that, it's, they're actually NHIs from other dimensions, other whatever. And by the way, they do, abduct people. That's a big one for people to swallow,
It is.
Because it makes you feel really unsafe. Like, are you telling me that anything could come grab me at any time? I mean, that's not something our government wants you to feel.
It is. It's interesting to kind of define that line with the average human being and their psychology, where, I've seen the videos. They're grainy, but there are things moving in ways we can't do yet. I'm on board. I get it. And then, you get to the anal probe and I've been abducted.
It's a little more uncomfortable.
But again, part of the show is that we're not going to just dismiss that because it's uncomfortable and it's old. Ontological shock coming your way. Free energy. No more utility bills. That's all I got. Sorry. Sorry,
I kind of like that one.
No more utility. You got to have it somewhere, right? Sorry.